Celeste Monroe knelt on the weathered wooden pier, her hands carefully cradling an injured sea turtle that had washed up on Seattle's waterfront. The morning fog rolled in from Puget Sound, creating an almost magical atmosphere around her as she worked. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her jeans were already stained with seawater and sand. This was her third rescue this week, and each one broke her heart a little more. The turtle. A young green sea turtle, she'd named Neptune, had plastic debris wrapped around its left flipper. Celeste spoke softly to the creature as she carefully removed the waste, her voice mixing with the gentle lapping of waves against the pier. She had always believed that animals could understand kindness, even if they couldn't understand words. "There you go, beautiful," she whispered, examining the flipper for any lasting damage. "Just a few cuts, but you'll be swimming again soon." But sound of expensive leather shoes clicking against the pier made her look up. A tall man in a perfectly tailored navy suit was striding toward her, his phone pressed to his ear. Even from a distance, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his free hand clenched and unclenched at his side. "I don't care what the board thinks," the man was saying into his phone, his voice carrying across the water. "Harrison Westbrook wants to meet my family before he invests. Find me a solution, or we lose everything." Celeste frowned. She recognized that voice from the news. Nathaniel Blake, the tech billionaire who owned half of downtown Seattle. His company, Blake Industries, had been making headlines lately for all the wrong reasons. Stock prices falling, investor confidence shaking, rumors of bankruptcy swirling through the financial world, but right now, he was walking directly toward her rescue station without looking where he was going. "Sir, watch out for the Celeste," called out. But it was too late, the crash that changed everything. Nathaniel Blake, distracted by his phone conversation and the mounting pressure of his failing company, didn't see the marine rescue equipment scattered across the pier. His foot caught on a coil of rope, sending him stumbling forward. His phone went flying, landing with a splash in the water below. The collision was spectacular. Nathaniel crashed into Celeste's mobile rescue station, sending her carefully organized supplies flying. Medical equipment, water buckets, and rehabilitation tools scattered across the wooden planks. Most importantly, Neptune the sea turtle went sliding across the pier toward the edge. "No." Celeste lunged forward, catching the turtle just before it could fall back into the water. She held the creature protectively against her chest, her heart racing from the near disaster. Nathaniel sat up slowly, his expensive suit now decorated with seawater and sand. He looked around at the chaos he'd caused, his gray eyes wide with shock and embarrassment. "I'm so sorry," he said, scrambling to his feet. "I'll pay for everything, whatever it costs." "It's not about money," Celeste said firmly, checking Neptune. "For any new injuries. This turtle has been hurt enough already. He needs medical attention, not a traumatic fall into the bay." She looked up at Nathaniel for the first time, really looked at him. His dark hair was disheveled, his usually perfect appearance completely ruined. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. They weren't the cold, calculating eyes she'd expected from watching him on the news. They were warm, filled with genuine concern and regret. "Is he okay?" Nathaniel asked, crouching down beside her. "The turtle, I mean. Did I hurt him?" Celeste was surprised by the sincere worry in his voice. She'd expected him to be impatient, dismissive, ready to throw money at the problem and walk away. Instead, he was gently reaching out to touch Neptune's shell, his movements careful and respectful. "He'll be fine," she said, softening her tone. "But I need to get him to the Marine Center quickly. His flipper was already injured, and the stress from this incident won't help his recovery." Nathaniel nodded, then looked around at the scattered equipment. "Let me help you clean this up. It's the least I can do." The desperate proposal for the next 20 minutes, Celeste and Nathaniel worked together to gather her supplies. Amazed at how willing he was to get his expensive suit dirty, how carefully he handled each piece of equipment. Most wealthy people she'd encountered treated environmental work as something beneath them. But Nathaniel seemed genuinely interested in what she was doing. "You do this every day?" he asked, helping her load the rescue station back onto its cart. "I'm not at my regular job," Celeste replied. "I'm a marine biologist at the University of Washington. But the ocean doesn't wait for business hours when animals need help." Nathaniel studied her face, something shifting in his expression. "You're passionate about this work. It's my life, she said simply. These creatures depend on us to protect them. If we don't, who will? They walked together toward the Marine Center, Neptune safe in his transport carrier. Nathaniel had grown quiet, thoughtful. Several times, Celeste caught him looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Ms. Monroe," he said finally, as they reached the center's entrance. "I have a rather unusual question to ask you." Celeste raised an eyebrow. "How do you know my name? Your identification badge," he said, gesturing to the university ID clipped to her jacket. "And I couldn't help but notice you seem to be exactly the kind of person I need." "I'm not sure I follow." Nathaniel took a deep breath, as if steeling himself for something difficult. "I need someone to pretend to be my fiancé for 2 weeks." Yes. "It's a business arrangement, nothing personal. But it could save my company and potentially change your life." Celeste stared at him. "You serious?" "Completely serious. There's an investor, Harrison Westbrook, who's very traditional, believes in family values, stable relationships. He's made it clear that he prefers to do business with settled men with wives and long-term commitments. So get married," Celeste said bluntly. Nathaniel's laugh was bitter. "It's not that simple. The women in my social circle would see this as an opportunity for something permanent. I need someone who understands it's purely business, someone who won't get the wrong idea about what this arrangement means." Celeste felt a flash of indignation. "Someone who's not good enough for your social circle, you mean?" "That's not what I meant at all," Nathaniel said quickly, his cheeks flushing. "I meant someone authentic. Someone real. Someone who cares more about sea turtles than social status." The offer she couldn't refuse, Celeste handed Neptune over to the Marine Center staff, her mind racing.
Ow.
This was definitely not how she'd planned to spend her morning. What exactly would I have to do? Attend a few business dinners, maybe a charity event or two. Be charming, supportive, believable. We'd need to create a convincing backstory about how we met and fell in love. After 2 weeks, we have a very public, very amicable breakup. You keep the engagement ring as compensation, plus $50,000. Celeste's breath caught. $50,000 would fund her research for years. But there was something else. Something that made her hesitate. What's in it for you, really? Besides the investment. Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment. My company employs over 3,000 people. If we go under, they all lose their jobs, their families, their futures. I know that might not seem important to someone who saves sea turtles, but those people matter to me. The sincerity in his voice surprised her. This wasn't just about money or power. It was about responsibility, about protecting the people who depended on him. "And if I say no?" she asked. "Then I respect your decision and find another way to save my company." You have to ask. "What's your dream? What would you do if money wasn't an obstacle?" What? Celeste looked through the window at Neptune, now safely. "In the care of the marine veterinarians, I'd establish a sea turtle conservation program, build a proper rescue and rehabilitation center, study the effects of ocean pollution on marine life, create educational programs to help people understand how their actions affect the ocean. Harrison Westbrook sits on the board of the Ocean Research Institute," Nathaniel said quietly. "He's also their largest private donor. One word from him, and you'd have access to their facilities, their funding, their research programs." Celeste felt her heart skip. The Ocean Research Institute was legendary in marine biology circles. Their resources, their reach, their ability to make real change in ocean conservation, it was everything she'd ever dreamed of. "You'd really arrange that?" she asked. "I'd give you my word. And despite what you might think about billionaires, my word means something." 3 hours later, Celeste found herself in Nathaniel's downtown office, still wearing her sea-stained clothes and trying to process how dramatically her life had changed. The office was impressive, but surprisingly warm, with floor to ceiling. Windows overlooking Elliott Bay and comfortable furniture that looked actually used. "First things first," Nathaniel said, pulling a small potted plant from his desk drawer. "I saw you talking to the turtle earlier. You seem to understand that living things need care and attention." Celeste looked at the plant, a small succulent that was clearly thriving. "You keep plants in your office? Find them calming?" he said simply. "They remind me that not everything in business is about profit and loss. Some things grow slowly, need patience and care." She studied his face, seeing something vulnerable there. "Is that what you think about your employees?" Did they need care and patience? I think about them as people, not just numbers on a spreadsheet. Maybe that's been my problem. Maybe I've been too focused on taking care of people instead of taking care of profits. Celeste felt something shift inside her chest. This wasn't the cold, calculating billionaire she'd expected. This was a man who was genuinely worried about the people who worked for him, who kept plants in his office and spoke gently to injured sea turtles. "Tell me about Harrison Westbrook," she said, settling into the chair across from his desk. Nathaniel pulled out a thick folder. He's 75 years old, widowed 3 years ago. He has 4 children and 9 grandchildren. He's known for his integrity and his belief that personal character reflects professional competence. And he's coming to Seattle when? Tomorrow night? Dinner at the Four Seasons? Just the 3 of us so he can get to know you? Celeste felt a flutter of nerves. What if he doesn't believe we're really together? Then we'll have to convince him. Nathaniel looked at her seriously. This won't be easy. Westbrook is sharp, experienced. He'll be looking for any signs that our relationship isn't genuine. How do we do that? I mean, we barely know each other. We learn. Nathaniel said simply. We spend today getting to know each other. Real things, personal things. The kind of details that couples share. For the next several hours, they talked. Really talked. Celeste learned that Nathaniel had grown up in a small town in Oregon, that his father had been a high school teacher and his mother a nurse, that he'd built his company from nothing, starting in his college dorm room with nothing but an idea and determination. Nathaniel learned that Celeste had grown up near the ocean in California, that she'd known she wanted to be a marine biologist since she was 7 years old and saw her first sea turtle, that she'd worked 3 jobs to pay for graduate school, that she'd never been in a relationship that lasted more than 6 months because her work always came first. What's your favorite thing about the ocean? Nathaniel asked, as evening fell outside his office windows. The way it's always changing but always the same, Celeste said thoughtfully. Every wave is different, but the rhythm is constant. It's like the ocean has its own heartbeat. That's beautiful, he said, and she could tell he meant it. Your favorite thing about your work? She asked. The moment when an idea becomes real. When something that existed only in someone's imagination suddenly exists in the world, helping people, making life better. They ordered dinner from a nearby restaurant, eating in his office while they continued to learn about each other. By the time the city lights were twinkling below them, Celeste felt like she'd known Nathaniel for much longer than one day. There's something else, Nathaniel said as they were finishing their meal. We need to decide how we fell in love. Our story? Celeste smiled. How about this? You were walking on the pier one morning, stressed about work, saw me rescuing a sea turtle, and something about the way I talked to the animal made you stop and watch. You offered to help, and I was surprised by how gentle you were with the turtle. And then, Nathaniel prompted, and then you asked me to coffee? I said no at first because I thought you were just another rich guy trying to impress someone. But you kept showing up at the pier, helping with rescues, learning about marine life. Eventually I realized you weren't trying to impress me. We're trying to understand something that mattered to me. That's a good story, Nathaniel said softly. It feels real. Maybe because it's not entirely made up, Celeste said, surprising herself with her honesty. Their eyes met across the desk, and for a moment, the air between them felt charged with possibility. Then Nathaniel's phone buzzed with a text message. Breaking the spell. Westbrook's confirmed for tomorrow night, he said, reading the message. Are you ready for this? Celeste took a deep breath. I think so. But Nathaniel, what happens if we actually convince him? What happens if he believes we're really in love? Then we'll have succeeded, he said simply. And maybe, just maybe, we'll both get what we need. Celeste left his office that night. She couldn't shake the feeling that this arrangement was going to be more complicated than either of them had anticipated. But for the first time in years, she felt like she was on the verge of something extraordinary. Whether it was the opportunity to save the ocean or something else entirely, she wasn't sure. But she was ready to find out. Celeste stood in front of the mirror in Nathaniel's guest bedroom, hardly recognizing herself. The elegant navy dress he'd arranged for her fit perfectly. The stunning sapphire engagement ring on her finger caught the light beautifully. But beneath the polished exterior, her heart was racing with nervous energy. You look beautiful, Nathaniel said from the doorway, his voice soft with what sounded like genuine admiration. He looked devastatingly handsome in his charcoal gray suit. But Celeste could see the tension in his shoulders. This dinner with Harrison Westbrook would determine the fate of his company and the lives of his 3,000 employees. Remember, he said, adjusting his tie nervously. We met 6 months ago at the pier. We were rescuing a sea turtle. I was taking a morning walk to clear my head. I offered to help, and you were initially suspicious of my motives. But your genuine interest in marine conservation won me over, Celeste finished, and we've been inseparable ever since. The Four Seasons restaurant was everything Celeste had expected from Seattle's most exclusive dining establishment. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over pristine white tablecloths, and the soft murmur of conversation created an atmosphere of refined elegance. Celeste felt completely out of place, but Nathaniel's reassuring hand on the small of her back gave her courage. Harrison Westbrook was waiting for them at a corner table with a perfect view of the city's skyline. He was distinguished and sharp-eyed, with silver hair and the kind of presence that commanded respect. When he stood to greet them, Celeste could immediately see why Nathaniel was nervous about impressing him. "Nathaniel," Harrison said warmly, shaking hands with genuine affection, "and this must be the remarkable woman I've heard so much about. Mr. Westbrook, I'd like you to meet my fiancée, Celeste Monroe," Nathaniel said, his arm sliding around her waist in a gesture that felt surprisingly natural. "Please call me Harrison," the older man said, taking Celeste's hand and studying her with intelligent eyes. "I understand you're a marine biologist. How fascinating. Tell me what drew you to that field." Winning over the skeptic as they settled into their seats, Celeste found herself relaxing under Harrison's genuine interest. He asked thoughtful questions about her work, her research, her dreams for ocean conservation. She spoke passionately about the declining sea turtle populations, the impact of plastic pollution on marine ecosystems, and her vision for creating comprehensive conservation programs. "Remarkable," Harrison said, his eyes twinkling with approval. "Nathaniel, you've found yourself a woman with both intelligence and purpose. That's increasingly rare in today's world." Nathaniel's hand found hers across the table, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture that sent warmth shooting through her body. "She's extraordinary," he said, and something in his voice made Celeste's heart skip. "She makes me want to be better than I am." "And how do you feel about Nathaniel's work?" Harrison asked Celeste. "Technology and environmental science don't always see eye to eye." Celeste smiled, thinking of their conversations over the past day. "Actually, I think they complement each other perfectly. Technology has the power to solve environmental problems, but only when it's guided by people who understand what's at stake. Nathaniel has that understanding." She wasn't lying. During their preparation time, she'd learned about Blake Industries' recent pivot towards sustainable technology. Nathaniel had been quietly developing clean energy solutions, water purification systems, and biodegradable materials. His company's financial troubles had started when he'd chosen environmental responsibility over maximum profit. "Interesting perspective," Harrison mused. "And your families? How do they feel about this union?" Celeste felt Nathaniel tense slightly. Beside her, they'd prepared for this question, but it was still delicate territory. "My parents live in California," she said carefully. "They're thrilled that I've found someone who supports my passion for marine conservation." "Flying up for the engagement party next month? And yours, Nathaniel?" Harrison asked. "My sister Penelope is over the moon," Nathaniel replied. "She's been telling me for years that I work too much. I need someone who can remind me there's more to life than board meetings and profit margins." Harrison nodded approvingly. "Family support is crucial for a successful marriage. I've seen too many promising unions fail because of outside pressure." The charity gala challenged 3 days later, Celeste found herself in an even more challenging situation. The annual Seattle Marine Conservation Charity Gala was one of the city's most prestigious events, and Nathaniel had arranged for them to attend as his company's representatives. The ballroom was filled with Seattle's elite, and Celeste felt every eye on her as they made their entrance. "Just be yourself," Nathaniel whispered in her ear as they approached the first group of guests. "Yes, that's what made Harrison believe in us." But being herself at a charity gala was easier said than done. The conversations revolved around yacht purchases, art acquisitions, and vacation homes in the Hamptons. Celeste smiled politely and tried to contribute when she could, but she felt like she was speaking a foreign language. Everything changed when they reached the auction portion of the evening. So the items up for bid included artwork, luxury experiences, and vacation packages. But when they announced a research grant for marine conservation, Celeste's entire demeanor shifted. "Ladies and gentlemen," the auctioneer announced, "our next item is a $50,000 research grant for marine conservation, donated by the Ocean Research Institute. This grant will fund critical research into sea turtle rehabilitation and habitat restoration." Celeste's breath caught. This was exactly the kind of opportunity she'd dreamed of. But the starting bid was already beyond anything she could afford on her university salary. "25,000, called out a voice. From across the room, 30,000, came another bid. Celeste watched helplessly as the bidding climbed higher and higher. Beside her, she felt Nathaniel shift in his seat. 75,000, he called out clearly, his voice carrying across the ballroom. Celeste turned to stare at him in shock. "Nathaniel, what are you doing?" 100,000, he said, ignoring her whispered protest. The room fell silent. The auctioneer looked around for other bidders, but no one else spoke up. "Sold to Mr. Blake for $100,000. Moments of truth later that evening, as they walked along the waterfront where they'd first met, Celeste couldn't stop thinking about what Nathaniel had done. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. "The research grant, I mean? That wasn't part of our arrangement." "I wanted to," Nathaniel replied simply. "I saw your face when they announced it. Saw how much it meant to you." They stopped at the same pier where they'd collided just a week earlier. The moon reflected off the water, creating a path of silver light that seemed to stretch to infinity. "Nathaniel, I need to ask you something," Celeste said, turning to face him. "Earlier tonight when we were dancing, when you told Mrs. Patterson that you'd never been happier, was that part of the act?" Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes reflecting the moonlight. "No," he said finally, "it wasn't." The admission hung between them, charged with possibility and danger. Celeste felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. "This is getting complicated," she whispered. "No," he said, stepping closer. "But maybe complicated isn't such a bad thing." When he kissed her, it was soft and gentle, and nothing like the passionate embraces she'd seen in movies. It was tender, questioning, full of promise and uncertainty. When they broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "Celeste," he began, but she pressed her finger to his lips. "Don't," she said. "Don't say anything that might change what this is." But even as she said it, she knew it was too late. Whatever this arrangement had started as, it was becoming something else entirely. The unexpected complication the next morning brought news that changed everything. Celeste arrived at Nathaniel's office to find him pacing behind his desk, his phone pressed to his ear. "I understand the timeline," he was saying tersely. "But surely we can work something out." He hung up and turned to her, his expression grim. "What's wrong?" she asked. "That was Harrison's assistant. He's moving up his timeline. He wants to finalize the investment agreement this week, not next month. That's good news, isn't it?" "It would be, except he's also invited us to spend the weekend at his estate in the San Juan Islands. He wants to see how we interact in a more intimate setting, away from the formality of business dinners." Celeste felt her stomach drop. "Whole weekend of pretending to be in love." "There's more," Nathaniel continued. "He specifically asked about our wedding plans. Wants to know when we're getting married, where we're honeymooning, how many children we want." The weight of the deception suddenly felt overwhelming. Celeste sank into a chair, her head spinning. "Nathaniel, we can't keep lying to him. It's getting too complicated, too detailed." "What happens when he wants to meet my parents?" "What happens?" "When he starts planning business around our fictional future together." Nathaniel stopped pacing and looked at her. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe we need to tell him the truth. If we tell him the truth, we lose everything. The investment, your research opportunities, my company. And if we keep lying, we risk losing everything anyway when he inevitably finds out." They stared at each other across the office, both knowing that they'd reached a crossroads. The easy chemistry they'd discovered, the growing feelings between them, all of it was built on a foundation of deception. "There's another option," Nathaniel said quietly. "What's that?" "We could make it real." The words hit Celeste like a physical blow. "What? We could get engaged for real? Make this arrangement into something genuine?" Celeste stood up abruptly, her heart pounding. "Nathaniel, you can't be serious. We've known each other for a week. I know that when you talk about your research, your whole face lights up. I know that you put sugar in your coffee but never in your tea. I know that you hum when you're concentrating, and that you have a small scar on your thumb from when you tried to help an injured pelican when you were 15. How do you know about the scar? Because I've been watching you, really watching. You, and I know that when we danced at the gala, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Celeste turned away, walking to the window that overlooked the pier where they'd met. You don't love me, Nathaniel. You love what I represent. I'm convenient, available, safe. He moved behind her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. Nothing about this feels safe to me. You make me want to be the kind of man who deserves you. And what kind of man is that? The kind who puts people before profits. It's the kind who cares about sea turtles and plastic pollution and making the world better instead of just making money. Celeste closed her eyes, fighting the tears that threatened to fall. You're asking me to risk everything on something that might not be real? I'm asking you to take a chance on something that feels more real than anything I've ever experienced. She turned to face him, seeing the truth in his eyes. He meant every word. This powerful, successful man was laying his heart bare, taking the biggest risk of his life. What if it doesn't work? She whispered. What if we try this and it falls apart? Then we'll have tried, he said simply. Isn't that better than always wondering what if? Celeste studied his face, seeing vulnerability there that he probably showed to very few people. I'm scared, she admitted. So am I, he said, but I'm more scared of letting you walk away. Before she could change her mind, before she could think of all the reasons this was crazy, Celeste stepped forward and kissed him. This time, there was nothing tentative about it. It was a kiss full of hope and fear and the promise of something extraordinary. When they broke apart, both of them were breathless. Okay, she whispered, let's try. The ferry ride to Harrison, Westbrook's private island estate in the San Juan Islands, should have been romantic. The Pacific Northwest coastline stretched out in all directions, dotted with evergreen islands and framed by snow-capped mountains. Celeste stood at the ferry's railing, breathing in the salt air and watching dolphins play in the wake, but her stomach was twisted in knots. After their decision to make their relationship real, she and Nathaniel had spent the past 3 days in a strange limbo. They were no longer pretending, but they weren't quite sure what they were instead. Every touch, every kiss, every shared glance carried the weight of uncertainty. Second thoughts? Nathaniel asked, joining her at the railing. Third and fourth? Thoughts, Celeste admitted, but not about us. About this weekend. Harrison is so sharp, so intuitive. What if he can tell something has changed between us? Maybe that's not a bad thing, Nathaniel said thoughtfully. Maybe he'll see that our feelings are genuine, even if our beginning was unconventional. The Westbrook estate was breathtaking. The sprawling cedar and glass mansion sat on a bluff overlooking the water, surrounded by carefully maintained gardens that somehow looked both manicured and wild. Harrison greeted them at the dock personally, wearing casual khakis and a sweater that made him look more like a favorite grandfather than a powerful investor. Welcome to Serenity Point, he said warmly, embracing them both. I hope you don't mind, but I've invited a few other guests for the weekend. My daughter Rebecca and her family, and Dr. Victoria Hayes from the Ocean Research Institute. I thought you and Victoria would have a lot to discuss, Celeste. Celeste's heart stopped. Dr. Victoria Hayes was a legend in marine biology. One of the most respected researchers in the field. She was also known for her ability to see through pretense and detect authenticity from a mile away. That's wonderful, Celeste managed, her voice only slightly strained. Meeting a hero dare, Victoria Hayes turned out to be a woman in her 60s. With silver hair, keen blue eyes, and the kind of presence that commanded immediate respect. She was sitting on the estate's wraparound deck when Harrison introduced them, reading what appeared to be a research journal while watching harbor seals play in the water below. Dr. Hayes, Harrison said, I'd like you to meet Celeste Monroe and Nathaniel Blake. Victoria looked up, her gaze immediately focusing on Celeste with laser-like intensity. Ms. Monroe, I've heard quite a bit about your work with sea turtle rehabilitation, particularly your research into the effects of microplastics. On reproduction rates? Celeste felt her cheeks flush. You know my work? I make it my business to know promising young researchers, Victoria said with a slight smile. Your paper on artificial nesting sites was quite innovative. though I have some questions about your methodology. For the next hour, Celeste found herself in the most intellectually stimulating conversation of her life. Victoria challenged her assumptions, suggested new approaches, and shared insights from decades of field research. Nathaniel sat quietly beside them, occasionally asking thoughtful questions that showed he was genuinely interested in understanding their work. "You have a good man there," Victoria said quietly to Celeste when Nathaniel excused himself to take a phone call. "Not many people in his position would take the time to really understand what drives us." "He's special," Celeste agreed, and realized she meant it completely. "I can see that you think so," Victoria said, her eyes twinkling. "The way you look at him when he speaks, the way he watches you when you're passionate about something. It's quite lovely, actually." Celeste felt a warm glow in her chest. If someone as perceptive as Dr. Hayes could see the genuine affection between them, maybe they really were building something real. The confession that evening after a dinner, filled with laughter and engaging conversation, Celeste and Nathaniel walked along the estate's private beach. The moon was full, casting a silver path across the calm water, and the only sounds were the gentle lapping of waves and the distant call of night birds. "I need to tell you something," Celeste said. "Yes." Stopping near a piece of driftwood that had been shaped by years of tide and storm. "That sounds ominous," Nathaniel said, but his tone was light. "Dr. Hayes offered me a position today, a real position at the Ocean Research Institute. It's full funding for my research, access to their field stations around the world, a team of graduate students." Nathaniel was quiet for a moment. "That's incredible, Celeste. It's everything you've dreamed of. There's a catch," she continued. "The position is based in Hawaii. I'd be moving there permanently." Now Nathaniel was very still. "When? In 3 months? After I finish my current research obligations at the university?" 3 months, he repeated quietly. "Nathaniel, I know. We just decided to try making this real. But this opportunity, it's what I've worked toward my entire career." "I know," he said, and she was surprised by the understanding in his voice. "I would never ask you to give up your dreams for me. That wouldn't be love. It would be selfishness." "So what do we do?" Nathaniel was quiet for a long time, staring out at the moonlit water. "We have 3 months to figure out if what we're feeling is strong enough to survive distance and change. And if it is, then we find a way to make it work. Blake Industries has been looking to expand into sustainable technology. Maybe it's time to open a research facility in Hawaii." Celeste felt tears prick her eyes. "You'd really consider that? For you?" "I'd consider anything." They walked back to the house hand in hand, both lost in thought. The weekend had revealed so much about what they could be together, but it had also highlighted the challenges they would face. The final test Sunday. Morning brought Harrison's final evaluation. He invited them to join him for coffee on the deck before their departure, and Celeste could sense that this was the moment when he would make his decision about the investment. "I've enjoyed getting to know you both this weekend," he began, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. "You're a remarkable couple, Nathaniel. Celeste clearly brings out the best in you. And Celeste, I can see that Nathaniel supports your ambitions in a way that many men would find threatening." "Thank you, Harrison," Nathaniel said. "That means a great deal coming from you." However, Harrison continued, and Celeste felt her stomach drop. "I have one more question, and I want you to answer honestly, because I think I'll know if you're lying." They waited, hardly breathing. "Are you two planning to have children together?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. They'd never discussed children. Never even considered that their fictional relationship might extend that far into the future. Celeste felt panic rising in her chest. This was it. This was where their carefully constructed story would fall apart. "We haven't talked about timing," she said carefully. "But yes, eventually." "How many?" Harrison pressed. 2, Nathaniel said, without hesitation. "Maybe 3. Celeste wants them to grow up near the ocean, and I want them to inherit her passion for protecting the environment." Celeste turned to stare at him in amazement. His answer was so specific, so thoughtful, so genuine that she almost believed it herself. "And you're prepared for the challenges that come with balancing 2 demanding careers and a family?" Harrison asked. "We'll figure it out together," Celeste said, finding her voice. "That's what partners do." Harrison studied them for another long moment, then smiled. "In that case, I'm prepared to move forward with the investment. Blake Industries will receive the capital it needs, and Celeste, I'll be personally recommending you for additional research grants beyond what Victoria has already offered. The wedding ceremony took place on the same pier where Celeste and Nathaniel had first met. It was small and intimate, with just their families and closest friends in attendance. Harrison served as Nathaniel's best man, and Dr. Victoria Hayes had flown in from Hawaii to attend. Celeste wore her grandmother's simple pearl necklace and a flowing white dress that moved beautifully in the ocean breeze. Nathaniel looked handsome in his navy suit, but it was the expression on his face that took her breath away, pure joy, mixed with something that looked like wonder. When we first collided on this pier, Nathaniel said during his vows, I thought it was an accident. Now I realize it was fate. You've taught me that the most important things in life can't be bought or negotiated or planned. They have to be nurtured, protected, and cherished. You've shown me that love doesn't have to be a choice between personal dreams and shared dreams. Celeste replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. You've taught me that the right person doesn't ask you to change who you are. They help you become the best version of yourself. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the sound of their kiss was almost drowned out by the applause of their guests and the cry of seagulls. Overhead, new beginnings. 1 year later, Celeste stood in her new laboratory at the Blake Industries Marine Research Center in Maui, watching her team of researchers prepare for their morning dive. Through the lab's floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see the crystal-clear waters of the Pacific, where healthy populations of sea turtles now thrived thanks to their conservation efforts. Dr. Blake, her research assistant, called out, "We're ready for the habitat assessment." Dr. Blake. Celeste still smiled every time she heard it. She'd kept her maiden name professionally, but hearing herself referred to as part of the Blake family never failed to warm her heart. "I'll be right there," she called back, making a final note in her research journal. "Working late again?" Nathaniel asked from the doorway, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the casual clothes he preferred when he wasn't in business meetings. "The turtles don't keep regular hours," Celeste replied, accepting her coffee gratefully. "Board meeting go? Excellent." The Sustainable Technology Division exceeded all projections this quarter. Harrison is thrilled, and the environmental impact reports are even better than we'd hoped. Nathaniel had been true to his word, establishing the Hawaiian Research Facility and relocating much of Blake Industries' operations to focus on environmental solutions. The company was now more profitable than ever, proving that doing good and doing well could go hand in hand. "And the other news?" Celeste asked, trying to keep her voice casual. Nathaniel's face broke into a grin. Dr. Chen confirmed it. "We're having twins." Celeste felt tears of joy spring to her eyes. After months of trying, they'd finally gotten the positive pregnancy test they'd been hoping for. But twins were an unexpected bonus. "Harrison is going to be insufferable," she laughed, thinking of their investor-turned-surrogate grandfathers. Likely reaction. "He's been dropping hints about wanting to spoil grandchildren for months. He's already talking about setting up trust funds for their education," Nathaniel agreed. "And Dr. Hayes has offered to be their honorary grandmother and teach them about marine biology." They stood together at the window, watching the sun set over the Pacific. In the distance, a pod of dolphins played in the waves, and closer to shore, the distinctive silhouette of a sea turtle surfaced for air. "Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if you hadn't crashed into my rescue station that day?" Celeste asked. "Every day," Nathaniel replied, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "And every day I'm grateful for that collision. Even though it started with a lie?" "It started with necessity," Nathaniel corrected gently. "But it became something true. Sometimes the most important journeys begin with unexpected detours." Celeste leaned back against his chest, feeling perfectly content. Their love story might have begun with a business arrangement, but it had grown into something neither of them could have planned or predicted. It found their way to each other through honesty, trust, the shared belief that some things were worth fighting for. Outside their window, the ocean stretched endlessly toward the horizon, constant and ever-changing, just like the love they'd built together. And in the warm Hawaiian evening, surrounded by the work they both loved and the family they were creating, Celeste knew that their greatest adventure was just beginning. The sea turtle that surfaced near the shore seemed to nod in approval before disappearing beneath the waves, carrying with it the blessing of the ocean and the promise of tomorrow.